into the presentation, I wanted to just mention a couple of housekeeping things. This is the meeting. And although for today, we're not going to have the time at this meeting, at this convening, to dig really deep into each criteria, we appreciate the super helpful feedback we've already received and encourage you to continue to use the tool to provide important feedback. You can also provide feedback via an email address that Maggie can put in the chat. And we have provided a notes page that you can utilize today to take notes on each criteria and use that as an attachment to the email if that's a preferred method of providing feedback. So I'll just jump in and start doing the agenda review. I will be facilitating part of the meeting and then handing it over to Amy and Joanna on our team. So for introduction, since this group has already met, we thought that it'd be best to have everyone introduce themselves in chat with your name and your organization. We're going to go over goals and next steps, highlights, guidance manual example. We're going to talk about feedback from the stakeholder convening from May, and we're going to then jump into the STARS level 2 through 4 and then close up. So I'm going to just take a moment to introduce myself and we're going to go through. Okay, great. I see people are introducing themselves. So the goals for this meeting, the goals for the STARS revision are to avoid redundancy with the licensing regulations, reduce administrative burden for providers and streamline the process, especially the documentation process. And we also want to shift the focus from a points-based system to a continuous quality improvement model with group will be presented to the CDD-QRIS revision team, and we will consider that input for further revision to develop the final proposal, which will then go into the promulgation process, which is the rulemaking process. And that process will begin after the criteria has been finalized. And that, of course, as most of you are aware, will also include a public comment period. Next slide, please. So want to kind of note these important things. I see Janet can't see the chat. Sorry, I'm trying to monitor the chat as well as present. So we're going to hold harmless providers for 1 year from 7/1/23 to 6/30/24. That's going to be state fiscal year 24. And that applies to programs that have applications due in state fiscal year 24. So if you have an application during that year, you will be held harmless and can anticipate to begin for the next fiscal year of 25. And we also don't anticipate that many programs will lose a level in the new system, and programs who don't meet the criteria for at least their current level will have 1 year to meet any of the criteria that they're missing to maintain their current level. And crosswalks will be completed for programs with accreditations. And we want to talk about supports for programs that will be part of this new system. We have and will leverage some of the supports that are currently in place. There is a document that lists those supports, and we try to link it to this PowerPoint, and we're not able to because of permission settings, and we're trying to figure out how to provide that list to the stakeholder group so you can see what we're hoping to leverage that we currently have, that programs that already exist. And then we're also working on business technical assistance for programs as well as coaching. Next slide, please. Continuing with highlights and things to note, we are acknowledging that that all the criteria does not apply to all settings, and the language of if applicable will be used to make this indication throughout the system. And the term state approved means that an assessment or tool has been reviewed by the CDD. And specific tools are not going to be listed because, as we all know, those can change with best practice. And we want to make sure that we can provide that information in a place where we can update it with time. Next slide, please. I am now going to hand it over to Amy Bolger, who will take you through the next few slides.
Okay, welcome everybody. I want to echo Ray's remarks. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. So as you look at these, you'll recognize them for the most part. They are either a reflection of current arenas, or maybe the language is slightly different, but they're categories that you'll recognize. These have been used by our QRIS planning team to frame our discussions as we've been meeting since, I think, December. And as we've been going through criteria, we've been taking a look to see how many do we have that are families and community, how many health, pedagogy, etc. I wanted to take a moment here to give you a definition for pedagogy because it's not a term that actually appears in our current system. So what pedagogy is, it really just refers to the methods and practices of a teacher. It's how a teacher approaches their teaching style, and it relates to the different theories that teacher uses, how the teacher gives feedback, and how they set assessments, the assessments they set. When people refer to the pedagogy of teaching, it just simply means this is how the teacher, or in our case, we sometimes use the word provider, delivers a curriculum to the learners. So I wanted to give you a quick example. As a family child care provider, your teaching practices will include a focus, for sure, on building and nurturing relationships, on interacting, and on actively engaging the children in your program as learners. But let's say, for example, you identify your program as one that is play-based, that's your pedagogy. You may have a published curriculum you use, or you may have developed your own. And you will have your own style of play-based teaching. So for example, you might read a book and talk about it with the children. You might play outdoors. You might, make something together in the kitchen. These are all examples of a play-based pedagogy. And, you'll probably have free play, but you also may have play that has rules to follow. So the point here is that CDD has no interest, it wouldn't be best practice for us to tell you what pedagogy to choose. Your program can choose and you won't be judged on your particular choice. The important thing as far as the quality recognition and improvement system goes is that you as a provider, as a program, you think about and choose that pedagogy and implement it. And why? Because it gives you insights into best practices for your setting, just as an assessment would do. Next slide, please. So the STARS guidance manual is, as it says, a companion tool for STARS. And why we would have it, similar to the licensing regulations guidance manual, it's a tool to help programs understand each criterion and why are those criteria important. You will see in the guidance manual that we all know there are variations by type of program, and we will elaborate on that in the guidance manual. It will say who does what, clarify who's responsible. It will list what we're expecting, what we're requiring for evidence to verify that a program has met the criteria that they need to at a particular level. Similar to the guidance manual for license, there will be a definitions section. If we need to, if we think it would be helpful, we will give some examples to make that criterion clearer. And then there will be a list of resources, tools, templates, checklists, links to relevant websites, that sort of thing. I think we mentioned earlier, maybe it was last night, we did one of these sessions last night as well, that, and as many of you know, because you participated, we had work groups that were functioning before the pandemic started. And I wanted to just quickly show you a slide, not to spend time there. You can go to the next slide. Of the type of thing that we're doing, that the planning team is doing currently with the proposed criteria, and what the work groups were working on before the pandemic hit. This is the kind of information we're collecting that will go in the guidance manual. You can go to the next slide. This is really kind of what it's going to look like. So, and this should look familiar to you, even though the language isn't exactly the same as it is in the licensing manual. It's set up similarly. So we talk about what's the intent. We talk about why is this particular criterion included. You'll see some blue, verbiage in here. Those are links that you can click on that will take you to that definition session, perhaps, or to some additional information that you may find helpful. And then, you can see we have a general information and resources, section, and then that list of resources that I talked about in the previous slide, or two previous slides ago. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm actually going to stop right here before I go into the feedback from the stakeholder convening and see if anybody, I'm going to look in the chat, see if anybody has any questions about that guidance manual piece. Right, I'm hearing none. So we have numerous opportunities for you to give us feedback around these criteria. And we asked 3 questions. One, asking you to react to and give us input on structure. One about what resonated for you. In other words, what stood out. And one about concerns. And actually, if you look in the resonance column, you'll see a couple of concerns. I'm going to just walk us down through these. We found them incredibly helpful as we designed this, this session or convening that we're doing today. And we just want to say, thank you so much. And I also want to say that I think as we progress through the slides today, many of the questions may be answered for you or addressed. And if they're not, you'll have a chance to ask. We are not going to go through every comment because we've got a lot individually. But as I think, Ray, you may have mentioned, you will have another opportunity to register your input and thoughts in a survey that will follow today's convening. I will say most responses that we got did not indicate concern. And so we created this visual to highlight a few that came up in the feedback. One really positive thing was we got lots of comments that suggest that the idea of having CQI as the backbone of a new system was favorably received by many of you. So I'm going to start with that structure column, the number of levels. As you know, as we've mentioned, but it bears repeating, we are going to continue to have 5 levels. Level 1, obviously licensing, 2 through 4 are blocks. Level 5 will be a choice level. We do not have an intention at this phase in the revision of STARS to untie from tiered reimbursement for a variety of reasons. In terms of measurable criteria, I wanted to just note here, as Ray said, we didn't put in the criteria themselves specific tools, but When we talk about assessment tools in a criterion, what we are talking about are assessment tools with which you are already familiar. So these would be tools like the ERS tools, class, the SAP QA, the TPOT, some of those tools. And there may be others that we'll add after we review them and approve them or not. Clarity of the system. So in our discussions from the get-go, and I would say this goes back over all the years that we've been working on this system, we have focused on discussions about the importance of having a system that is clear, not only for providers, of course for providers, but also for families and other stakeholders so that it'll be an understandable system. So sort of in that spirit, we really want you to focus on the clarity of the substance, not so much wordsmithing today, but to focus on the concepts, and then our team will do the wordsmithing for clarity. However, I will say too that we have gotten some suggestions yesterday in the session, also in the feedback, for changing some of the words. It's really helpful. Keep it up. It's really helpful for us to consider. The new hybrid system, under what stood out for you, in this particular phase of revision, this is not a negotiable. We are going to have a hybrid system, have blocks. Is a good thing because it will assure a consistency of quality across the STARS level. So the idea behind that is that families will be able to rely on the fact that a 3-star program in Windsor will look the same as a 3-star program in, St. Johnsbury, or look very similar in terms of its quality. And we also believe, and we really know that having a block system will go measurable steps toward achieving equity for programs. So again, in this phase, not untying from tiered reimbursement or subsidy, this is going to take some time. In terms of the lack of research, I assumed that that was a concern that was listed under something that stood out for you. One of the reasons that we have been working, we at the CDD has been working with our federal technical assistance partners, so experts from the BUILD initiative and others. We're working with Child Trends and building on that foundation that we put together previously that we brought to you when Melissa and Heather and other folks went out on tour. One of the things that we have asked them to do for us is to tell us if criteria that we are proposing are criteria that will be meaningful. In other words, that they're criteria that will be either research-based, that they'll be evidence-informed, or that they'll reflect promising practices and what we know about those. Okay, looking at my notes here. So changes may result in lower quality. Another reason for bringing in our federal partners. They would tell us, and we already had much of this discussion about the prior criteria from which we are building. I'm sure you've seen that some of the criteria are nearly the same, some differ fairly substantially, but many are very similar to ones that we proposed before and asked you for feedback on. I think the biggest changes are going to be for the programs at that STAR level 2. We know that you will need training and other types of supports, and during this transition year for the system, we are going to be working on that so that we're ready to roll those out during the held harmless year. Let's see. Other concerns. The level of work will differ for differently sized programs. I think that's a given. And unless we had separate systems for every single kind of program, that would be an option, but that would be crazy. And we've decided. And so, we will, as Ray said before, note in the guidance and possibly even in the criteria themselves that if applicable, and we'll tell you what programs criteria fit with. There were some concerns about the new application, that it would be more onerous, more burdensome, longer, more evidence to supply. All I can do is tell you, it is every intention of ours. We are doing everything we can. We are, and we love to get input from you on this. You know, our intention is to make it a whole lot less burdensome. And one step toward that is going to be to have it online. And then finally, I mentioned the supports in TA. Actually, I saw a list circulating in my email today about that. So we're definitely working on putting those together for you. Next slide, please. As Joanna goes through the criteria 2 through 4, it would be great. It will help us focus our discussion. If you think about these 4 things. Will the criterion support meaningful changes and promote school readiness? How's it going to work for you in your program, in your setting? Is it reasonable? Is it feasible to monitor and document in a way that won't be overly burdensome and that will be meaningful? And finally, what are those types of support you may need? I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions before we jump into the criteria.
Yes,
Team, did I miss anything?
Can you tell us where, I'm sorry, I'm new to Teams. Can you tell us where the chat function is available? I'm looking at all my little 3 dots and all that stuff and I don't see it.
Oh,
Thanks.
So I don't know what you're seeing, but I have at the top some icons, people, chat, reactions, camera, mic. I'm not sure if I can help you beyond that. And when I click on the chat, I can see the chat. Is there something I'm missing?
It seems that there's more than one of us who don't have access to the chat, just a heads up.
Oh, well, that's an issue.
Yeah, I can type into the chat, but I can't see any other entries other than the ones that I've put in. So I wonder if that's a setting we could change. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, because definitely, I mean, I don't know if we want to change it. Yesterday, whoever was facilitating was keeping an eye on the chat and relaying what was in the chat. I don't know how it was last night.
I can't see the chat, Amy, or write in it. So I tried to log back out and log back in to see if it would fix it, but I can't see anything.
Yeah, so people were definitely able to write in it yesterday. So I'm assuming they could see it as well.
Is anyone else from CDD seeing at the top of the meeting chat, it says the meeting chat is muted. And when I click on settings, I keep clicking unmute save and it's not letting me unmute. So I'm wondering, did anyone?
I see that now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did anyone internally accidentally mute it? Because I feel like whoever did it is probably the one that has to undo it. It's not letting me undo it.
I just tried to
see that.
it. I mean, it doesn't say mute on mine. There is an option to reset to default, but I don't know if that would be helpful. It still says meeting chat is muted for me, but I don't have that set as a setting. How about others?
My meeting chat looks fine, so.
I can chat and I can see it, so.
Mine looks fine too.
Yeah, mine too.
And Nicole, I could see your message. Can people see the?
Katie or Beth or Jackie, no.
I don't see the chat function at all on my toolbar.
Until we figure this out, is emailing also an option?
For what it's worth, the chat just appeared in my bar that had not been there before. So that's true for anybody else.
It's up at the top. One of those icons at the top. The bubble says chat. Is there people still not seeing that?
I still don't have a chat bubble.
All right, well, we do have, we can send out the email not through the chat. And try to get this squared away for next time. Could any of you, I'm just gonna ask the folks who don't see the chat now, did you see the chat last time?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I just folks from CDD, when I hit the ellipsis, the 3 dots, if I scroll down toward the bottom, there's an icon that shows the little chat bubble, and mine did say don't show chat bubbles, and so I hit that, and it says show chat bubbles now. So I don't know if one of us maybe, if we
I had the
all,
same thing happen, Leslie. That's
Me too.
so I have it saying show chat bubbles now. I don't know if that helped.
Yeah,
do we know
mine.
who set up the meeting in the first place?
Maggie?
I did, and I just went in and unclicked those so that you could see the chat bubble and allow notifications and turn on incoming video. All of those were checked as unenabled. So they are now. So I'm hoping that was the issue and that it fixes things, but
Maybe we just have to talk.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
there
that
is
was my suggestion, just to use if you have the hand button, if you can raise your hand and or physically raise your hand, and we'll try to take down as much of the information verbally as we can.
I do see your chat, Janet.
Lori?
Lori, hands up.
Yeah, I just have a question. Thank you for all this. This is really helpful. I feel like some of the questions I had when I was filling out the form and reading through everything probably would have been answered, or certainly would have been answered by having access to the guidance manual. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but I feel like to really answer some of the questions that were asked, like around, is this doable, right? Is this really going to help with quality? Like, I just feel like I didn't have enough information, and it could just be because I'm new to this. I wasn't a part of the original stakeholders group. I just would hate to keep asking the same questions, right? That are going to be answered in additional material. So I'm just putting that out there. It might be helpful for us to see some of that, at least, as we're trying to help answer those questions that were posed as part of that form.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll be frank and say that the guidance manual is as yet not ready for publication. It's not fully developed. But I appreciate that. I mean, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, right?
So we should just keep asking the questions, right? Because I kind of feel better. Like, yeah, this will be a,
Yeah, because
so
that will
just keep asking
help us
questions.
with the guidance manual. Yes.
You got it. Thank you, Amy.
Sure. Okay, Joanna, I think it's time.
Okay, here we go. Ready to jump into the criteria. I'm going to pause at the end of each slide to allow people to make comments. I guess we're gonna forget about putting them in the chat, but if you raise your hand, I can call on you and then your comment will get recorded. And also there will be an email that you can email comments to if you're not comfortable raising your hand and speaking up. The 2-star criteria are the purpose of these criteria and the thinking around putting these here, and the reason there are a lot is because these are all meant to be sort of the base from which all the subsequent STAR levels will be developed, and for your program. And the Continuous Quality Improvement Plan, or CQI plan, that's part of every level. The policies that'll be developed and implemented as part of the STAR level 2 criteria will inform not just the CQI plan for this level, but for the CQI plan and subsequent levels. So that each one of the steps is intended to build upon the steps that came before. So for 2 stars, criteria number 1, the program implements written wellness policies. And those policies will include a policy for children and a policy for staff. The second criteria, the program implements pedagogical practices that consider the needs of each and every child in alignment with the Vermont Early Learning Standards. And just to clarify again, because there were some questions already posed about this, people were concerned that there would be specific pedagogies that they would have to follow. And that is not the case. This would be individual teachers, pedagogical philosophies, as long as they are in alignment with the Vermont Early Learning Standards, and as long as they are also developmentally appropriate, equitable, and responsive. For number 3,
Joanna,
staff who lead a
can I ask a question?
At least
Can
till
you
the
wait
end.
to the end of the slide, and then I'll make space
Sure.
for questions. Thanks.
Okay.
Staff who lead a classroom of children must complete a self-assessment on staff-child interactions using the state-approved observational assessment tool. And again, it doesn't say what the tool is here, because this is a standard, and that's going to go through the legislative process, and we don't want to name tools that we can only change later by going through the process again. So we want to leave some flexibility for us to be able to update the tools available based on best practice and development of new tools, etc. Number 4, the program writes and implements a developmental screening policy. In partnership with families, the program uses a state-approved tool that is linguistically and culturally responsive. And in some of the comments we already received, there were a couple of comments that led me to want to clarify that the developmental screening policy is a screening policy. The developmental screening is a tool that would be used with children in the program to determine if they are hitting their developmental milestones, or if to highlight in a particular case where a child might need some additional services or support in meeting those milestones. This would be an ongoing practice that a program would be engaged in, and it would be up to them to decide, what the timelines would be, but it would not be something like program assessment now where it's every 3 years. This would be ongoing because children are constantly changing and growing. And the last one for this slide, program leader has completed the basic specialized care training within the past 5 years. So now, Tricia, you had a comment.
Yes. So obviously I'm looking at this from an after-school youth-based lens, right? Mm-hmm. So my first concern is that it's in alignment with the Vermont Early Learning Standards, only because a lot of school-age programs, we may have programs that are serving 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, but are still under stars. Mm-hmm. So Vermont Early Learning Standards only goes up to grade 3, if I'm not mistaken. So naming that out is going to automatically preclude some programs. It's just, how is that inclusive of after school? So that's my first comment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'll just quickly say, I think this is going to be one of those criteria that are going to have, if applicable, attached to it.
But don't you still, but I think there should be some sort of program practices that are developmentally appropriate. Are you saying the Vermont Early Standards piece would say if applicable? Because I think the standard, the criterion is good. It's just, it's not going to align with the Vermont Early Learning Standards.
Right, for school age children and youth. Yep, I know, I got your point. Thank you for that comment.
Okay.
That's a good comment.
The other thing, again, number 4, I mean, school age programs aren't doing developmental screenings. So again, would that just say if applicable, and school age wouldn't have to do that one?
I believe so, and that is currently, that's what's in the current system. I would imagine that would be another if applicable one.
Okay, and then number 2, is that, I don't understand that, and maybe again, because I'm coming from the school age world, what is a self-assessment on child-staff interactions, and what would be an appropriate tool? Is that something school age would do? I guess I'm just not understanding that one.
I cannot give you a definitive answer on that, but I believe that your comment will trigger us to clarify that a little bit more. I would assume there would be some sort of a self-assessment, and it maybe wouldn't be necessarily staff-child interactions, since I don't know what would be available that would be appropriate for school age programs, but your question would definitely spark us to determine that a little more clearly. So thank you.
I mean, when I think of a staff self-assessment, I think maybe using the school age core knowledge and competency areas in the area of child development or something. I'm just putting that as a note. Right. So thank you.
And that's helpful, Tricia, because we might be able, for example, if the after school world felt, like you said, about another criterion, this is an important criterion for us to have, but there's a piece of it that doesn't apply, we may be able to reword it to accommodate a particular tool that your world uses. This is exactly the kind of input that's really helpful for us.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other comments? If you can access your toolbar, you can raise hand, or I can't see everyone's face. So if you click the raise hand icon, I see one. Stacy.
All right, let me lower my hand. Okay. I guess I'm wondering about definitions, and maybe this is the kind of things that are in guidance. Wellness. I don't know. What does that mean? What is a wellness? Is about sick? Is it about staff taking care of themselves? I don't know. I just thought it was so vague. Equitable, I thought could be pretty, I really value, and I guess let me start with, I'm excited to see wellness, equity, things like that showing up in STARS. I think it's very important to be explicit about that and not just assume that programs care about that. So I don't have an issue with it being in there, but I think it would be beneficial to have some more definition. Maybe that's the kind of thing that shows up in the guidance or in that manual. I think my other question was about the developmental screening policy. I guess I was curious for what purpose. Again, something I really believe in, but writes and implements one in order to do what? To determine who's admitted, to make TSG as appropriate as possible, to why are we doing that? I could see it being used for reasons that aren't so supportive of being responsive to kids or equitable concerns. So I guess I just was wondering, I know how if we do ASQs, I feel like that helps us know where kids are at and help meet their needs, but I could see, I don't know. I guess I just wanted some clarity on what some of these words were and how it would be used.
So I just look back to the work that the work group did, and I'm going to tackle this wellness policy one and see if it will give you an idea of what might appear, something that might appear in the guidance manual, which, as I said before, is currently not ready for publication, being drafted. But essentially, we had defined a wellness policy as a set of statements around specific practices promoted at a program, in the program. So the day-to-day practices of the program would play a key role in helping children, families, and staff develop healthy habits for lifelong wellness. And, you know, this is particularly true with the pandemic and, you know, serving families and children who have experienced trauma, that sort of thing. When we talked about why, it's that a wellness policy can kind of communicate core values and principles regarding healthy habits to child care providers, to families, and to the community for your program. You know, help child care providers and families act as role models and set a standard that is clear and consistent. Help guide those teaching children about the importance of developing and maintaining healthy nutrition, physical, social, emotional habits to support wellness, etc. So we're not going to do this for each one of these criteria, which you may have questions about. It is the kind of thing that will go in the guidance manual. But I thought it appropriate to take a moment to give you an example of the kind of thing that might appear in our guidance manual. You know, you had it just right when you asked about where that would go. And Joanna, I'm going to let you talk about the screening policy.
Oh, okay. Okay, sure. The screening policy is there for programs to have a mechanism by they can identify children who may need special supports or who may whose families they may need to give referrals to so they can access services for their children. If it were to be used in a different way, like as a screener for who that program would accept, I would hope that would not happen, and that's certainly not the intent of that criterion at all. Any other comments? And if not, I think we'll go to the next slide.
The only other thing that I would add is somebody asked this question last night as well. And we noted there that the tool that is currently being used is the ASQ and the ASQ social emotional, the ASQSE.
Thanks. Okay. We're ready for the next slide. Oh, there it is. I was looking at it this whole time thinking I had it moved. Okay, sorry. Okay, number 6, the program maintains and appropriately uses a current list of referral pathways. This criteria is connected right to that developmental screening tool criteria. So if a child has been identified who might need additional services that aren't available in the program, that the program has access to information about what those referrals are and how families can access those referrals and services. Number 7, the program demonstrates how they considered the cost of care per child and program expenses when creating a working annual budget, or appropriate staff are taking an approved class or training, and that approved class or training would be in how to determine the cost of childcare and program expenses. So they can create a budget, and that would also inform rates, how they would set their rates and other practices that would support the sustainability of their business. Number 8, staff members responsible for a group of children are given weekly paid planning time. Time needs to be provided during the workday for uninterrupted planning purposes. We did have a question last night, and the question was whether or not this could be done during nap time. And the answer is it can be done anytime, as long as the individual who's receiving the paid planning time isn't responsible for, let's say, napping children, so that it's truly uninterrupted for the purposes of their planning. And number 9, the program develops a continuous quality improvement CQI plan that includes goals with action steps identified and incorporates results from the self-assessment. The CQI plan is reviewed annually and the program updates the plan as necessary. The CQI plan should include staff input if applicable. So that if applicable, obviously for a home-based program, there aren't going to be staff, so that that particular part of the criterion wouldn't be applicable for people in programs where there is one staff person. Okay, so now we can, you can either press the raise hand icon. Amy.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that we have a comment in the chat. I know that not everybody can see it, so I'm going to read it. Why 9 criteria? Did you consider fewer? Is there the potential to reduce the number of criteria based on feedback or research into other QRIS systems? So I'm going to break that down. We have been considering at some points more and at some points fewer. We used a variety of lenses to figure out what we wanted to include as something that was among the few and the powerful criteria at this level. There is a potential to reduce the number based on feedback or research into other QRIS systems. We are working with our federal TA partners who work with QRIS systems across the country. So we're getting that kind of feedback from them. I would say that I'd like to know more from you, Janet, about what's behind this concern, if you could articulate that for us. Is it?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah. I'm trying to think about this from, I think that, as, with coming from Vermont AUIC's perspective, thinking about what is a standard that is sort of should be associated with somebody's professional preparation and training versus with their versus sort of a program administration standard. So trying to understand sort of the interaction there. It also, overall, as I looked through things, it feels like, if there's the commitment to continuous quality improvement, then it feels like having some, domain that you can see a clear progression across, as you increase in stars levels will be, that's actually, then you're clear on sort of the CQI piece of it of like, okay, then I'm a little clearer on what my reflection is and what my next steps are, but sort of to have 9 and then to have, across 4 full star levels, that starts to feel like a lot of pieces for people to keep track of. And I had thought that some of the impetus for all of this was to have it be sort of the clear, easier for the programs to manage, easier for them to document, easier for families to understand. And so 9 across 4 levels, if we're not, counting the first level, that just seems like a lot. Especially when a lot of these are double, there's 2 things within every single one within most of these standards, right? That they're maintaining the list of pathways and they're using it. The budget thing has 2 pieces to it. So I'm just trying to figure out if there's ways that we can actually, again, focus on those things that we know the research base shows us are more truly tied to kids' outcomes and what families want.
So that is what we're doing. We're definitely using that lens. And in total, currently proposed, there are 23 criteria. There are 9 at star level 2, 9 at star level 3, and 5 at star level 4. The documentation and evidence that will be needed and requiring tracking, I dare say, is going to be more at star level 4 than at star level 2, because even though there are fewer criteria, they're more complex. And it's likely that the evidence may be a little bit more or about the same as the other two, even though there are a larger number of criteria. Another thing that I would note for you is that we are definitely trying to think about, we're going to have an online system. So anywhere you see developing a policy, we're hoping it'll be a snap to just upload that policy once and check a box in ensuing years. So if it's the list of referral pathways, somebody would upload that. They might upload it again when they're renewing their application with some updates to it, for example, or just check a box that you've got the one we're still using. So I'm sort of getting into a little bit more detail here about the kinds of thinking that we're applying to make sure that it is a streamlined process for providers. And you will see also that the progression across the tiers won't necessarily follow exactly from, in some cases it will, and I'll give you an example, but in some cases it may not follow exactly across the tiers. But you may see, for example, that and I'm just making this up, but in star level 3, there's a criterion that actually flows from 2 criteria in star level 2, right? Does that make sense? So I hope I'm, in a maybe somewhat roundabout way addressing some of those concerns. I would say the only other thing that I would say, I said I would give you an example. The CQI plan is at every level, and doing an assessment is at every level. In star levels 2 and 3, the assessment is a self-assessment. In star level 4, you're bringing in, a program would be bringing in an assessor. So it builds, some of them build directly across that way, and it becomes a little more appropriate, I guess, to star level 3. The expectations are slightly greater at star level 3 than they are at star level 2, but you have those 2 levels to get used to doing an assessment and understanding the process and getting ready for it. Joanna or others from the team, anything you want to add? Because it's a great,
No.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Janet, if I could say.
I didn't want to add anything. I was going to just find out what it is that Deb Gass has to say, because she has her hand up. Thank you, Deb.
It's not related to number 9, it's related to number 8. So I want to make sure you feel complete with number 9 before we jump back one step. Yeah? Okay. So I know that we are looking at 2 stars level criteria. And when I see number 8, it makes me feel like that's a no-brainer, but I understand that it's not. And so I have 2 questions. I have a question and a concern. The question is, I don't remember whether this is a licensing regulation or not. So if it is, does it need to be? It's not. Okay. Then secondly, the reality, honestly, especially these days when we're struggling with staffing shortages, is that planning every day is unrealistic. Having planning time every day is unrealistic. I would be much more comfortable with changing work day to work week, and wondering how the team would feel about that. Because it does, given weekly paid planning time needs to be provided during, are you saying each work day, or are you saying once a week?
A work day.
It needs to be, it's weekly, and during working hours, that might be more of a clarification. so that the person's not being expected to do it outside of their, or, you know, that they're not being paid to do it.
Yep.
Not
Yes.
at night. Or,
Yeah, working hours sits with me better. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Let's see, Beth Traver Adolphus, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, hi, thanks. So I just wanted to follow up a little bit on what Deb was talking about and some clarification. So, you know, with the short staffing piece that's been going on, our team is always, you know, all our classroom teams are always getting planning time each week. But it may, you know, if things are, you know, we have to juggle a little bit so that they aren't able to do it during the workday, but we pay them to do, you know, an hour at night, and then they get off an hour earlier the next day just because of the way, you know, our schedule is working out. Would that not be acceptable?
That's a question we would have to consider, and it would be clarified in the guidance if that would be acceptable or not. I don't feel comfortable saying one way, yes or no, right in this moment here, but I appreciate that you brought up that issue for clarification, because if you're wondering, others are too, I'm sure. Let's see, Lori Metcalf has a question.
Thanks so much, Joanna. I actually have two general questions before I comment on this one, just to make sure I'm keeping focus. If we've answered, like, if we've given feedback and questions and stuff in that form, we shouldn't be taking it. I don't need to take time here in this form to do it, or should I be reiterating what I put in that form here? That's the number one question, because I don't want to take time with the group to go over all my questions or comments here when you've already received them. Am I accurate in that? Like, if you've got them that way, we're good. Amy's shaking her head.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I wish we had more time and could go over like every single, you know.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I was like, wanted to make sure I was doing due diligence. The other question I have is, will there be a time to ask general questions? So on the form, and in it, this criteria in particular sparked my sparked the reason, because I have a general question about the language, or how we align this criteria with the other criteria's programs that we need to follow. And I just didn't know, is this a good time to ask that, or is there a general question time it fits better under?
We haven't designated a general question time. Unless you disagree, Joanna, I would say now's the moment.
Great, thank you, Amy. Is that okay, Joanna? One of the things that occurs to me as I was going through all the criteria was that there is, you know, we have different standards depending on where we're at as directors or where we're at as a program. And like, you know, there's the NACI criteria, right? And like, I just recently went through step 3 criteria and Convening seminar. And I'm wondering if, and you may have already discussed this prior to this, but is there, or there's a licensing criteria, is there common language, right, that we're bringing from these other criteria into our quality rating system? And I only say that because I think some of the confusion comes, right, when we're not, like, we've got this set of criteria and this and this and this, but really they're very well overlapped, right? When you talk about pedagogy, for example, which isn't this one, but when I think about, like, what's the goal of weekly planning time, right? People are going to get caught up, my program included, like, oh my gosh, I'm in a workforce shortage. I cannot make this happen every single week. That's the truth. We try to do it other ways. But if the goal, right, is to make sure that that curricula is intentional, well-planned, you know, what's the outcome, I guess? And then is there a different way to, like, have that outcome be met in language that's already common and familiar? I don't know if what I'm saying I'm articulating well, but that's my question, is about common language.
Do you want to take a shot, Joanna, or do you want me to?
Well, I think, and I haven't been part of the developing these criteria as much as you have, so you probably know more about what the intentions are, but the what I understand the intention of the wording of the criteria is that there will be alignment if the criteria is similar to another one that's another requirement for early childhood programs, because the idea is that people aren't being asked to do things twice or 3 times for different objectives. And certainly you mentioned the step 3 director credential. Having been part of that portfolio review process, there's so much in the director credential portfolios that is in similar or aligned with a lot of the criteria for STARS, and that's something that the internal group, as an internal group, we should take a look at. Whether or not we make the language align, or whether we say if you have completed your step 3 director credential, you automatically meet these criteria that are in, because you've already demonstrated in your portfolio that you or your program meet these criteria, that you don't have to show it again for STARS or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that brings to mind the crosswalks. We haven't mentioned that yet, but we're intending to do those once these criteria are set. Well, I mean, Ray, you did mention that, for accreditations, yeah. But I remember sitting down with Sonia and going through the proposed criteria on which these are built, and going through the NAEYC. And wow, I mean, we were on the phone, I think, for a whole day. And we came across a lot of language that wasn't shared, and we had a lot of that discussion, and it was really helpful. So any clarity that you want to lend to that, suggestions around language, we would appreciate.
And Amy, I think you hit the nail on the head of what I was trying to get to, the crosswalks, right? Well, like, for example, when my teachers are working with TS Gold and they might not be quite as familiar with VELS, like, I can show them that crosswalk. You see, they're the same, right? And so, like, if we had a crosswalk between STARS criterion, NAEYC criterion, credential, even the VELS criterion, even the VELS, right? It helps people synthesize this information in a way that's meaningful, I think, and less frustrating.
The VELS is a little different, just to note, because it's, it's standards as opposed to, a little different. But anyway, but yes, we're totally intending to do that.
Thank you, Lori. That's a great suggestion. And Beth, I see that your hand is up. So did you have another comment? And I see Diane's name flashing like she's muting and unmuting. Maybe, Diane, did you have something to say after Beth?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Beth.
Thank you. So this is kind of piggybacking on Lori's comments, I guess. With not just the common language. I'm very curious about that crosswalk piece, because I've been wondering with the program assessments, having assessors come in and things like that, where a number of programs are Head Start, Early Head Start, or partner programs of those, and haven't had to have that duplication of having an assessor come in because they're already being monitored, federally. And I'm just wondering if that piece is going to come into play at all. And I don't know, it used to be that NAEYC accreditation was similar. If you had, been assessed by NAEYC, that, you automatically get 5 stars. And I know that that's evolved over time. And so I'm just kind of wondering how to, do all those pieces without that redundancy, that Lori was mentioning too, with, those various pieces, because you've been asking about, trying to reduce the burden for programs. So that's a kind of big one. So just sort of wondering where that's going to land, but.
Thanks, Beth. I do believe the intent is to crosswalk these criteria with Head Start standards, with NAEYC accreditation, anything else we could think of, so that if you're meeting that criterion and we can demonstrate, if you have a NAEYC accreditation, we can say that we know that you did whichever criterion crosswalk, and you wouldn't be expected to do them again for STARS. And I think there are no more comments
Move
that we
forward,
should
yeah.
move to the next slide.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my little arrows. I just want to make a quick comment before Joanna talks about these criteria. For those of you using the notes template, the first criterion on the slide, and I believe it is the second criterion on your notes template, are both referring to, they're the same criteria worded differently. It was something that we had a discussion about and had two different versions. So we left it different on the slide and the notes template as sort of an example of this is what we need some help with the wording. We know we want a criterion regarding suspension and expulsion discussion, but we're really having some difficulty with the wording of it. So, so we just wanted to point it out that it is different. We know it's different, and that it's a really prime example of what we would really love to see some input about and get your feedback on. So
yeah, we discovered
Joanna.
last night that it was different.
Yeah.
And in the session, and we discussed today, well, what should we do? You know, should we? And we thought, you know, we made a commitment to have these sessions be as close as possible one to the other. So we're going to leave it and encourage you to give us input on both. But the substance is really about suspension and expulsion.
Okay. So here we go with the STAR Level 3 criteria. There are 9 again. And the criteria in STAR Level 3 are focused on programs intentionally promoting children's learning and development through observation and child assessment. So criteria number 1, the program implements policies to prevent removal or unenrollment of children from the program due to the child's challenging behavior. Which is aligned but not the same wording as criteria number 2 on your notes. Is that correct? And then number 2, criteria number 2, the program director or leadership implements relationship-based strategies to support all staff in continuous improvement and development. So what this means by relationship-based strategies, those are things like coaching, communities of practice, and supporting reflective practice in the program for the program staff in order to improve their teaching practice and learning. Number 3, program staff observe children daily and regularly document those observations to plan and implement curricula. And number 4, the program uses practices that prioritize each individual differences, abilities, and sense of belonging. The program implements evidence-based practices. And on number 5, the program conducts a self-assessment of each classroom using a state-approved observation assessment tool to inform the CQI plan. And thanks, Deb, for raising your hand. You have a comment or question?
So I want to go back to number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And how much discussion do you want to have about this in this moment?
How much discussion?
Yeah.
I would say that you should make your point, and we might not discuss it too much more here, just in the interest of the time. But if it would be recorded and will certainly be discussed going forward.
Okay, so I know that concurrently, the Department of Education is looking at the definition of termination and suspension, and it is a big hot topic in our world. And so when I look at the way you have articulated it, I like that much better. So when you talk about preventing removal or unenrollment of children, what you're talking about is, I think what you mean is two things: terminating a child from a program and or isolating them. Is that correct?
I believe so.
All right, because removal to me, what what does that mean? Does it mean you're sending them home for the day, or you're putting them in another room? It's not clear. And so I would vote for, I mean, unenrollment to me is the same thing as termination. And removal could be isolation, but then are there times when you think it would be appropriate to send the child home for the day or modify the child's program in some way? Those are issues that are coming up in the field.
Okay, so we would need to clarify that either in this statement or in the guidance. Yep, thank you. And I think that's, you've hit on what makes this such a difficult criterion to word. Okay, any other comments? Beth Truzansky.
Hi all, just great appreciation for all of your work and walking us through this. My comment is somewhat akin to Janet's comment earlier about the continued complexity of how to measure and track all of these pieces. And so as we aspire to kind of improve our current QRS system and make it more accessible for providers to follow as well as for others, I wonder if there's some continued prioritization that could happen so that I agree that a lot of this criteria resonates with me in terms of its importance, but the complexity is concerning. And so I wonder if there are pieces that, if we were to prioritize what we want to measure and what we want to consider quality, to get to closer towards our goals. So it's just standing out for me as we look at this 3-star level, as the criteria does seem important, but I'm wondering if there's kind of other ways to measure many of these pieces, and if they're represented in other criteria.
Thanks, Beth. I think that's I wouldn't have a answer to that right this minute, and I think maybe that's for more of a ongoing conversation. But thank you very much for bringing that up. And Deb, your hand is up. Did you want to make another comment? Or were you all set? Okay. I think I'll, unless anybody has anything else they'd like to say, I think we should move to the next slide. Okay. So number 6, the program ensures and provides equitable, high quality, inclusive, nurturing, and responsive environments. The program provides opportunities that foster culturally affirming relationships with families. And number 7, programs complete and document a self-assessment of family engagement practices using a state-approved tool. And currently, we use the Strengthening Families program self-assessment tool to do some of this kind of work in programs. And number 8, all program staff receive at least 2 of the following benefits: paid breaks, paid vacation, sick, personal, or professional days. This criteria is really similar to one in the administration arena right now of STARS, and the difference is that there was a requirement that paid breaks be offered in addition to 2 of these other types of paid time off, and it's now been included as one of the options. And the question came up last night, if a program offers as a benefit sort of a package of paid time off from which the employee selected how they wanted to use their time off as paid vacation, sick, or personal days. The answer is that would meet that criteria. So that was that question. And then number 9, the program updates and implements its continuous quality improvement plan annually. The plan uses the observational self-assessment required in number 7.
Number
right?
5.
Number 5, that's right. Confused the same thing last night. And an additional source of evidence. And I see Katie Brown has her hand up.
So I'm wondering when we will have access to the self-assessment tools that are state approved. And I know you guys want the sort of vagueness of being able to change them as preferred. But I'm just wondering how long providers will have to have access to these tools and learn how to use them, since it seems like there's multiple self-assessments that will be required in the new STARS criteria.
So the hold there will be they'll be available during the hold harmless year, and I think the plan is to provide trainings about how the tools are used, and that'll be something that also coaches I think will be one of the supports that are going to be provided are coaches, and they will have familiarity with the program assessment tools. As far as which ones, I can't say exactly when that's going to be determined or when that information is going to be made available, but maybe somebody else does know that and can clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it will definitely be determined by the time we publish the guidance.
Okay.
But the guidance, will live online and will be a document that can be updated as other tools become available, or, as we decide which tools we're going to be able to support. I wanted to also just give either Lynn or Ray or anyone really else from our team to weigh in on this piece. Lynn, did you have anything? I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you had something you wanted to add.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay.
I also have a question about number 8. So this requirement is something that most programs do, but is this in addition to the wellness part that will be part of star number 2? So the paid breaks, vacation time, personal time, professional development time, planning time on the clock, and a wellness time is now all part of the new STARS criteria?
So the way I would answer this is that the wellness policy could address some of these benefits. Potentially, we do have some template, or at least one that I know of, wellness policies for staff from our Vermont Health Department. And I think there are some others that our federal technical assistance partners may be able to provide to us. And so in that way, I think it does kind of build, but this is also, a business practice as well as a health related piece. Go ahead, Joanna.
Well, the other part of the question now, Katie brought up was if you, let's say your wellness policy has things in it that meet other criterion, would that count? Is that part of your question, Katie? I thought it was, and I would say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because once again, we wouldn't want you to submit the same information over for multiple criteria. If you submitted it once, it would count wherever else it counts. It looks like there's some.
That's a great example, actually, of that. Are you looking at the chat? A couple things in the chat that I missed initially, and we plan to come back to them once we go through all the criteria. I see another hand up. And that's Katie. Are you still, did you just want to put your hand down or?
No, I had another question, but my phone is ringing. Oh, sorry. My question is, could the AOE sort of share the information with the CDD about the expulsions that we sort of report out every year for Act 166 funding? Could that be a way that this can be more streamlined and it's not additional documentation providers need to provide to a different entity that represents the same information?
I don't have an answer for that. I don't know, Ray, you've had a lot more. Yeah, we don't have an answer, but we can bring that back to our group as a suggestion.
Okay, I think we are ready to move to the next slide. So these are the criteria for the 4-star level. As Amy mentioned before, they're pretty dense. And some of them, it's going to take a little bit of time to sort of read it and synthesize what it says and get an understanding of what we're really going for with some of these. But at the 4-star level, programs support a quality learning environment with curriculum implementation and social emotional interactions. Number 1, the program receives an assessment of all classrooms by a state-approved assessor using a state-approved assessment tool. So this differs from the criterion in the other levels because in this, at the 4-star level, somebody who is not a program staff member or employee or fellow teacher and doesn't presumably know the program well will be coming and doing an observation using a state-approved assessment tool. And I would add, if there are multiple tools that are approved, the program would choose which program assessment tool would inform their CQI plan and give them best information they could get for improving their teaching practice. And for criteria number 2, the program implements a culturally, developmentally, linguistically, and individually responsive curriculum that promotes all areas of development and includes family voice. And let me see if I can get rid of my toolbar. The last one. Oh, there we go. A program must integrate parent and family engagement strategies into all systems and program services to support family well-being and promote children's learning and development. Programs are encouraged to develop innovative 2-generation approaches that address prevalent needs of families across their program that may leverage community partnerships or other funding sources. So that second sentence is kind of a description of how a program might go about meeting the criteria that's described in the first sentence, I would say. Number 4, if applicable, the program has an implemented wage scale that recognizes qualifications and length of tenure in the field that is periodically reviewed and revised. And number 5, the program creates a continuous quality improvement, CQI plan, using multiple sources of evidence. The plan is formed with staff input and family engagement. And so those are all the criteria, and I would encourage people to ask questions or make comments.
Katie has her hand up. Katie, did you have a question? I see your hand up. Maybe it's from before. Sure. Something I wanted to point out to you is, which is different, is that family engagement, family voice, two generation, these are all pieces that speak to looking at the whole child, bringing in caregivers, meaning, you know, parents, grandparents, whoever the family is, and thinking about the program more broadly. And it's building, obviously, on STAR levels 2 and 3. So that's a difference and a sort of a more intensive focus. And I dare say, despite the fact that there are 5 criteria here, there will be a lot in that guidance manual, definitions and resources, etc.
Amy, Stacy's hand is up. Stacy, did you have a question?
Stacy, did you have a question for us?
Sorry, forgot to unmute. It's more like a comment. I guess I just wanted to mention that how much I appreciate the bar being raised and the things that are being emphasized, like wellness and equity and other pieces. Number 3 here, I think, is so important. And I guess my only comment is my program's a Head Start Community Partner Program. I have a little army of people who do this work on behalf of King Street. It is people's full-time jobs. It's hours and hours and hours every week. I know that King Street could meet this based on our partnership with Head Start, but I would be, if I was another kind of provider, I think the level, the develop innovative programming, the level of support, I think to do it well would require a lot of, not just coaching, but actual boots on the ground people to do this work. And I just am hoping that if we're going to put this level of intentionality in, which I really think should be there, it is what families really could benefit from. But without the workforce to do it, if we can't even get teachers paid time to take a break or to do planning, I guess I'm just concerned about how do we actually do this well? And are we putting something out there that then, you know, programs will make up ways that they're kind of meeting the criteria without actually having the person power to do this work. So I guess I just wanted to put that. I'm sure it's not something you don't know, but I wanted to give voice to it because I know how hard our Head Start team works.
Thank you. Deb?
I just want to tag on to what Stacy just said, and also mention that parent-child centers are also a part of this. Those parent-child centers who offer center-based programming, and all of this language and these expectations are certainly embodied in the parent-child centers as well. I agree with you, Stacy, that I think this is a direction we all need to strive for, regardless of our funding and our complexities. And I'm just wondering if I am not advocating for taking it out. I'm advocating for promoting it, and hoping that as we move forward in this industry, it will just become our culture. It will just become who we are. And I think this is the first mechanism to get that jump started.
Thank you. Katie, are you back with us? Did you have a question?
Katie, you're muted if you're talking.
Yeah.
I just forgot to put my hand down, sorry.
Oh, okay. Deb, is your hand still up, or? Thank you. Other thoughts or lingering questions? There's a lot here.
Do we want to go back to what was in the chat?
In the chat? Sure, yeah. Yeah, so Trisha asked a question. Now I got to go back to the chat. Let's see if I can remember what it was. Oh, yeah. And there's some other pieces. I see something from Janet. Innovation should not be a standard, very difficult to define unless we want best practices, not experimentation. Good point. The definitions are going to be hugely important. And certainly if you have, suggested wording, we're wide open. Yeah. And then for Trisha's question, this was in relation to the criterion related to planning time. Would a half an hour a week count? Will STARS have a threshold for planning time? This is not something we've discussed, but it's a good question. And something that we would address in the guidance manual. And if you have, concerns about it, please relay. And then Sarah, you have a comment. The way this feels is it seems like a done deal. Is it? Is this already written? And do we have little input, as that is what this feels like? And I would call on you, Nicole, to maybe address that one.
Yeah, I don't know that Sarah is still in the room, but I'm happy to
reach out to her.
And this is being recorded, so we can let her know that it's being answered. But no, it's really not a done deal. And there are some things, even just Trisha's question about would a half an hour a week be sufficient? Maybe not. But I think that's part of this conversation, right? Is what feels appropriate so that we can set those thresholds and we can be able to write the guidance manual and have appropriate benchmarks. And no, I think that we have worked with a lot of the materials we had from STARS Evolution, and we are working with Build, and we are working with other technical assistants and with community partners. But really, this is what we're putting out as our proposal, and we are open to, updating wording or looking at criteria and determining if there needs to be changes made. It's really not done at this point. So.
We have a comment in the chat from Luann. Imagine if all of the criteria were a part of the self-assessment process done with a coach who would help a program assess, set goals, and offer opportunities to progress through STAR levels by meeting goals instead of various criteria at each level. Yes, we have imagined, we are imagining, and that's just not something we can do at this time. I mean, we've tried to communicate that, and I hope that folks who are wishing we could just jump right there in this phase know that this is not unknown to the CDD. This is what the very newest research and best practice is suggesting, I think. I mean, it's been around for maybe three years or something like that. But we just can't untie right now from the levels with criteria. But we hear you. Does anyone else from the team want to add about that? And we're moving toward that, you know, by bringing coaching in and working on that that system. We are moving in that direction, I believe.
I don't want to leave you hanging, Amy. I just saw other people coming on camera, so I didn't know if they were going to talk. But I agree. I do love Luann's vision and think that we are trying to move in that direction as much as possible. And I'm really hoping that for programs, it will feel like we're moving in this direction by having the coaches and by having the CQI plan. We are still going to have, obviously, state approved assessment tools to look at certain things, but hopefully most of this work will be done through preparation, either individually or with a coach, so that it won't feel like you're ill prepared or that it's difficult to get prepared for an assessor to come and do any of the non-self assessments that we will be including.
Mm-hmm. And we, you know, that's a way for us to reduce the burden. You know, Melissa, Joanna and I were talking just the other day, and Joanna was noting to me that you know, that we have a number of us have been talking about this vision. We go to the Build Initiative conferences, and we've read the research, and we've been hearing about it. I think the pandemic, to be just candid, sort of set us behind a bit. You know, we may have been further along in the process of moving toward a system like that, had we not had these long holds, these pauses that we've had. But we are fully aware and love that vision. Any other? Oh, Janet.
So thank you for, that's helpful. That's really helpful to hear. I guess I would love, so it sounds like though, I guess, is it fair to say that what's being planned is just sort of a streamline and an update of the current system, so that this isn't truly a redesign of the STAR system? That what this is again, reduced duplication with licensing, which is one of the things you said was the goal. It's a way, and then you're also going to layer coaching. You're also going to begin to invest in additional coaching support. But it's really just sort of an update of the existing system. It's not a redesign at that point. How do you guys respond to that? Do you think that's a fair assessment, or is that not accurate?
We have really been categorizing this as a STARS revision. We've been going through a revision period. We are revising the program. We are moving into more of a hybrid system, specifically focusing more on blocks at the lower levels with points only on the upper levels. I would characterize it, however you want to say it, as a revision. When I hear the word redesign, I'll just say, like, my personal opinion would be we're looking at more of like a new program. We're creating a new program more than just revising the current one. So no, I don't think we're throwing this all out and starting from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's just for some of us. We're hoping that's where we were landing, was to a place where that was more like a redesign. So, okay, thank you.
But I will say we've been intentional about beginning to build foundations that could, you know, help us with a redesign. Okay, I see we're on the last slide. Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Okay. Yeah, so we have been added some updates to our webpage. There is the aforementioned follow-up survey that we would encourage you to continue to use to offer us your reactions and your input. The slides will be there. The video from last night, I think, should be there. If it's not today, tomorrow. And this one as well will be posted there. We're also going to take give you an opportunity to see the progression of the criteria across the levels. We struggled to try to figure out how we could have a slide that would do that. We realized that the text would be so small you wouldn't be able to see it. So we're working on, or maybe we've already figured it out, Leslie, you can tell me, but a way to make that visible for those of you who would find that a good way to look at the criteria.
I think
The
we're
next
going to
meeting.
try and add, sorry, Amy, I think we're going to try and add a couple options for people to view it so that however it works for you. So you'll be able to see just a couple different ways, the same information, but a couple different ways to visualize it. That's our goal for that.
And then did we figure out how we were going to post that supports document? Do we know about that yet?
We're working with Dania.
Working on that. Okay. So visit the website, take advantage of these opportunities. And then this is the date for the next meeting at which we'll be talking about STAR Level 5. Wednesday evening for that particular group, and the meeting for this group, July 21st from 1 to 2:30. Looks like we got almost 15 minutes to get back to you, unless anybody has something else you'd like to say before we close. All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.